Hi, everybody. I'm doing a little video about omitted variable bias and just to reinforce the ideas. So we'll have here on the shared screen a scenario. So on the x-axis, we have the Earned Income Tax Credit, the EITC, which is the main anti-poverty program of the United States. So people who work and don't earn very much income, under about $40,000, are entitled to an earned income tax credit. They get a lump sum payment. If they file taxes, they get a lump sum payment of anywhere between $2,000 and $10,000. Varies depending on the number of children they have and varies depending on the state that they live in. And of course, the time when it was less before it's increased over the years. So that's the earned income tax credit. And we'll imagine we think that getting this big bonus kind of anti-poverty payment from the US government will lead to an increase in child schooling attainment. So your kids will stay in school longer and be able to get higher schooling accomplishments. Maybe they graduate from high school instead of dropping out after they turn 16. So that's the relationship that we're interested in. And we'll imagine that it's a positive relationship. So we'll imagine there's some true positive relationship. We'll imagine we have a large sample of people in the United States, of households. The more earned income tax credit they get, the higher is their child schooling attainment. So that's our underlying relationship, and we imagine there's some true positive underlying relationship. And now we're interested in estimating this relationship with the sample that we have. But of course, when we talk about this true positive relationship, we think our estimate of that would be unbiased if there were no confounders. If it was true that the errors, the other factors, the confounders, if it was true that the other factors on average added up to zero, because sometimes they're high, sometimes they're low. So for some people with certain levels of earned income tax credit, they have other factors that lead to high schooling attainment, but they also have other factors that lead to low schooling attainment. So on average, they average out to zero. That won't be the case if there are confounders. A confounder is an omitted variable, an OV, an omitted variable that we can think of that satisfies our two-part test. The two-part test is that it has to be correlated with the explanatory variable, with earned income tax credit, and also has to directly affect the outcome of child schooling attainment. So here we have four possible omitted variables: parental leisure time, parental ambition. I call this parental's a grifter who doesn't value school, and parental income. So we're just making this up. It's omitted variable bias is always a theoretical thing. So we imagine in our heads what could be an omitted variable bias, an omitted variable, a confounder. We think in our heads, could that be correlated with the earned income tax credit? And does it directly cause child schooling, independent of its effect on earned income tax credit? So that's the two-part test that we go through to determine whether there is bias and what the direction of the bias is. So we have four cases here. So let's go through each one of these cases in turn. Four possibilities. They might all four be happening at the same time, in which case our estimates are a mess because we have omitted variables, a bunch of them. Or we might reasonably think, only one of these is really actually important. Or we might have measures of some of these. We might have a measure of parental income. We might have a measure of parental ambition, in which case those two wouldn't be confounders because we could just include them as control variables in our regression. So let's think about the first one, parental leisure time. We might think is negatively correlated with the earned income tax credit because the earned income tax credit by definition is associated with your earned income. So the more income you earn, the bigger your credit that you get. And so the less leisure time you have because you're spending all your time working. So there's a negative relationship we might imagine between parental leisure time and the earned income tax credit. And we might imagine that parental time at home leads to increased schooling attainment. Of course, we might argue the reverse. For people at the low income, the last thing the kid needs is for their parent who's having a hard time finding work to be at home. Parent might be a bad influence on them. So we need to, of course, consider things like that. But right now, all we have to do is imagine in our heads that those relationships are holding. Our second possibility is we have parental ambition. So because the earned income tax credit is something the parent actually has to file for, the greater parental ambition, the more they work to get the credit and file their taxes on time. And that ambition might be correlated positively with schooling. So some underlying parental attribute. And the next one is just the reverse of that. The earned income tax credit, instead of being assigned sort of correlated with parental ambition, is correlated with sort of parental grifting. And then that would be negatively associated with schooling. So that's our third possibility. And our last possibility is the higher your income, of course, the less earned income tax credit you get over a certain range, and greater incomes associated with greater schooling, quite naturally. So we have four cases, and that means we can work through the direction of the bias in each one of the cases. And you'll remember that the way we think about the direction of the bias, let me get my, going to make this a little bigger here. The direction of the bias, we draw our graph that's the true relationship. And then we think about, for different levels of EITC, what would be the pattern of errors. So, for example, if parents who had high earned income tax credit were, a lot of them were grifters who didn't value education, that's a negative error for many of our observations. So, kids who are in those households would have lower schooling, all else equal. So we'll have negative errors here. And of course, parents who aren't getting earned income tax credit are, kind of not grifters, I guess. It's a little forced, the example, right? Which suggests us shouldn't take it too seriously, but it makes a certain amount of sense. So that would be our pattern of errors. So we would estimate a relatively, it's hard to draw straight here, sorry, a relatively flat slope. This would be our beta 1 hat that we would estimate. And we see it's an underestimate of the true relationship between EITC and the schooling attainment. So in this case, it looks like the EITC isn't that influential in increasing schooling, but that's because we're omitting the fact that the high EITC people have this negative attribute influencing their kids and dampening, lowering their kids' schooling attainment. So that's just one of them. There's four of them, and I encourage you to do the other three, work through the pattern of errors, and see the direction of the bias.